best place to start is for me to explain what you're seeing on the screen right now around humankind. My belief is that we're in a very pivotal time in our history
Yeah, that's
where
great.
artificial intelligence is definitely coming to the forefront, and many people are struggling with how to make that either work for them or even to understand it in general. So what I like to do is I like to say that while there are these abilities that this technology is bringing to bear, as human beings, we need to remember that we have uniquenesses and gifts and things that we do that are very different in AI. And when we connect those two things together, we actually maximize the use of this tool. And I'll talk about that from the perspective of a professional trying to build their own capability or their own ability with artificial intelligence, and in this case, GPTs. And I'll also talk about how this impacts students as I go through the conversation. But what I wanted to do is give you a chance, Abera, to think about how you experience AI. Maybe you use AI daily, maybe you don't use it much at all, but a lot of people are thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, well, this is a game-changing productivity tool. It really helps me do things that I need to do. On the other extreme, some people are really seeing AI as a risk. It's scary. It's taking our jobs. It's taking over our minds. And there's this wide range. So for anyone listening in the future or for people on the call right now, think for a second about where you fall along this line. Is it somewhere to the left where this is a great thing, or more to the right where there's a little bit of fear? So I'm wondering if anyone on the call would like to say where you fall on this continuum. Okay, that's fine. So what I find in working with clients is it's the whole spectrum. Some people, like I said, are very comfortable and they're experimenting, and some people are very fearful and they're avoiding. And I think that's an important thing because I don't think AI is going to stop progressing. I don't think it's going to stop being a part of what we do on a daily basis. And it certainly isn't going to stop being something that our students are either using or pushing against, which we're starting to see more and more. Oh, can I? Hello. Hmm. Okay, I think there was a little background noise there. That's okay. So when I speak about staying human in the age of AI, what I'm really talking about is we have this very powerful technology, the most powerful technology of our time, but we don't want to lose what it means to be human. And what we're seeing is a lot of people are using these technologies to replace a lot of the things that humans are really effective with. And I think it's important that we think about that. And I think it's important that we think about how to stop that, because what we're doing is we're allowing artificial intelligence to do the things that we as people are uniquely gifted to do. So how can we help people utilize AI while continuing to develop those deeper capabilities? It's all about focusing on the human skills that shape learning, careers, leadership, and life. It's the intangibles: reading the room, understanding someone's perception, hearing something in their voice, all those things that make us uniquely qualified to interact with other people. And it's things like attention and purpose and self-efficacy, how we collaborate, how we adapt, how we learn. These are all very unique to the person, whereas AI can help with all of those skill building and all of those different abilities. It certainly can't take over those skills, at least at this point. To bring this into a little bit more clarity, there's this drift that's starting to happen. And humanity as a whole is not impacted all at once. It kind of erodes a little bit through invisible trade-offs as people tend to use artificial intelligence as a replacement for skills that humans typically would do. Let me give you some examples. You might be hearing or thinking, well, why focus as much when AI can help me finish later? Or why evaluate sources critically when AI summarizes everything for me? Or another one might be, why create something original when AI can generate something polished, or what seems polished, immediately? And when we start to lean heavily on artificial intelligence, we start to lose some things. We stop practicing our sense of attention. We stop practicing our curiosity, our discernment, our self-efficacy, and our creativity. These are the kinds of things that when we lean too far in the AI direction, we tend to lose the time and the desire and eventually the ability to do those things again that are uniquely ours. So it's really important as we're thinking about this that we rethink some of the critical questions, not only in education, but across our society, within the business environment, because the future readiness is shifting from information access to human development and capability development. It's no longer okay just to assume that the person with the most information wins. It's really, what are people able to do with that information that separates them from what other people can do with that information, that uniqueness again. So I'll give you an example. The old question is, and this is a big important part of the educational environment at a base level, what should people know? What are the competencies? What are the skills? What are the abilities? What are the facts? What are the figures? What are the dates? What are the techniques? What are the strategies? All those sorts of things are the kinds of things we would fill education up with in conjunction with experiences and projects and programs and group work, because that really helps to synthesize the teaching and learning experience. The new question, as I see it, is what should people practice so they know better? So it's no longer enough just to know. It's now important to understand the skills so that when they receive information, they're able to decide, is this information accurate? Is this information useful? Is it what I really need to solve the problem? So it's a higher level of thinking. It's critical thinking, which I know many of you teach as you're doing your particular expertise area in the classroom. But there's other old questions like, what do I need to know? Well, how do I think independently? As opposed to what do I memorize? Not that that's been around for, I think we've stopped really focusing on that, but how do I judge things more wisely is more of a new question. What should I produce? Well, another way of thinking of that, and I think one of the new questions is, how do I create originally? So when we think about how the classroom is shifting, because a lot of the information, the data, the facts, the figures are all easily accessible by our students and by ourselves by just going to a GPT or just going to a Google search, because AI is certainly very prevalent there. We don't need to know as much of those facts and figures because those are readily available as long as we verify them. What we really need to know for future skills is, what do we do with that information that's going to help us to solve problems? I'll pause. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's a small group, and unfortunately for those of you listening later, I can't really take your questions, but I'll pause. You certainly can come off mute and ask a question. Okay, that's absolutely fine. If you want to jump in at any point, I welcome you to do so. So before we get any further, I want to talk to you just a little bit about how artificial intelligence works. And in particular, when we're talking about these large amounts of information that are being synthesized across the world in data centers to provide us with answers when we request them. So there's something called an LLM. I'm guessing that you've all heard of what an LLM is. It's a large language model. This basically is the brain of artificial intelligence and these different GPTs that we use regularly. So a good way to start thinking about this is, a large language model is like a vast library of interconnected books that represents a segment or aspires to represent all of human knowledge. Wow, that's a mouthful. Basically, if it's a large model, like if you're using Claude or if you're using OpenAI or one of those larger models that are public facing, Gemini, Grok, Copilot, all of these different tools, what they've tried to do over the past number of years is gather as much context and information as they can and put it into what could be referred to as a library, but it's a data center. And then they're building these tools that can go into the billions of pieces of information that exists there to pull out something to create an original answer. So if you think about a librarian, we interact with these models by providing prompts or questions, and that's very akin to going to a library and saying, I'm looking for books on cellular biology. Well, when you prompt generative AI, it searches all of that information to find the relevant information and generates an original response. That's why if you ask the same question twice, you rarely get the same answer, because it's pulling from all that information and it's doing it a little bit differently each time. A librarian, if you ask a question, they're going to have their own perspective, their own way of seeing the world, their own knowledge of that particular library, and their answer might be different than the answer that they'll give tomorrow because there might be new resources, or it might be different than the answer that another librarian will give. So, like a librarian, a GPT might require some clarification or additional context to provide accurate and insightful answers. Now, if any of you have ever built a custom GPT or you've prompted so that you're trying to refine what the GPT or the AI is trying to provide you for an answer, that just means that you're cutting back or culling or making smaller the amount of information you want that GPT to draw from. Same idea, but you're building your own library. So the librarian is serving like our GPT would as we're seeking answers in a vast repository of information. Now, kind of a funny thing, if you look at that image that I have on the screen, I actually used a GPT to create that image. If you look at it closely, there's a couple of flaws in this picture. Number one, if you look in the background, you'll see what appears to be a female, but you can't quite tell, with 3 legs walking right into a bookshelf. And I'm not even sure what that person's carrying. It looks like a book, but it might not be. If you look above, you can see that the lighting isn't consistent. There's shadows and light sources in all different directions, even though the lights are all in one actual direction. So I did that on purpose because I want you to recognize that as you're asking these GPTs and AI for information, it's not always going to give you exactly what you want. It's going to make mistakes. And that's why the critical win and the reason why we have to think about how humans and AI interact is because the human has to be the person. Well, it's the only person in the equation, but it has to be the entity, if I may, that will provide the safeguards, that will provide the governance, that will check the answers, that will make sure that what was given to them by artificial intelligence is actually accurate. It's vital. So, like a librarian, Gen AI, GPTs, can bring a little bit of personality, and this is kind of where it gets interesting. I'll pause though. Any questions? Okay. So I like to think of them as personality quirks, and some people will debate with me when I try to humanize AI. I try to make it seem like a human, but in many ways, the way this technology has been created is very, very different than other technologies that we use. If you go back 5 years ago and you did a Google search or a Bing search or any search engine, what that was doing is matching up keywords and information within the websites or the information that it was producing based on a one-to-one match. And it was black or it was either right or wrong. It was black or white. It was very, very easy to tell, well, that didn't get me the results I wanted. But now in the age of AI, when we do a web search, we get the AI response first. And that AI response is getting better and better and better every month. But there's still mistakes and there's still things that are inaccurate. And that's for a lot of different reasons. So some of the quirks that we see with AI, which many of you have probably experienced before, is the first thing that's interesting about AI that's different than other technologies is that AI and GPTs can remember what you asked prior. So if you prompt and then you go on and you ask other prompts, it might go back and pull information from 5 prompts ago into your new question. That can be challenging. And if you think about it, that's what human beings do. I might be having a conversation with you. You might be telling a story, and I might remember that story is a lot like one that you told me last year, and I bring that up for context. And I say, I remember you told me something like that. It's kind of interesting how AI mimics that to some degree, very different than other technologies. Another great example is the famous hallucination. So we all know humans can hallucinate. We won't get into that right now, but AI can do the same thing. When you ask a question, even if it's very clear of artificial intelligence, it can create nonsense, gibberish, or just inaccuracies. And it's vital as people, as humans, as we're using these tools, that we're double checking the accuracy and the context for the information that we're receiving. And that's where it gets nerve-wracking. Many people are stopping that. They just trust the answer, and that's not where we should be at. Another good example is context. Just like when we're interacting with human beings, when you're talking to me, I'm going to understand the relevance of the information of what you're saying. I'm going to gain some kind of context. Maybe we have a shared experience. And AI is starting to be able to do that as well. It kind of reads between your words to pull out context to try to answer that. It's not very good at it, but it does try. Another is persistence. As you know, with human beings, if you ask someone to shift their point of view, especially in our current global cultural environment, although it can shift from country to country, people can be very, very stubborn. The same can happen with AI, where you ask a question and then you ask to adjust that prompt or the answer that it gave you in a slightly different way, and it just gives you something very similar to what it did before. It won't be exact, but it might be similar. So it might persist on the answer that it gave you without moving on with you. So that can happen. Just a couple of more. GPTs can get lazy. If you've ever asked a GPT or an AI to give me a list of the best places to eat in this city and give me 3 bullets about why this is a great place to eat for each one, it might give you 3 bullets for the first 5 examples, and then the last 5 examples, it just gives you 1 bullet. It gets lazy. It doesn't want to finish the task, and you have to go back and say, can you please finish the task? And it will, but it might get lazy. And as humans, we see that too, where people just don't always follow through on everything that they say they're going to do. Curiosity, GPTs especially, AI especially, is starting to get better at asking clarifying questions. You give information, it's incomplete. It might come back with a question saying, can you give me an example? Or can you help me understand this better? Again, very human, but not. It is different. And of course, bias. This is one of the most challenging things with artificial intelligence because the data that these models have been trained on, and that's a lot of jargon. So the data is just the information, like the library books, that the model or the library, the books that have been put in that library, what if they were all sexist or racist or the opposite? That's going to create a bias in the kinds of answers that it gives. And because these models or libraries have been trained on human writing and books and context, it's going to pick up some of that context in the way that it answers. Early on in the game, when you asked a question about a particular occupation, it might talk about that occupation with a particular gender. And that's not really accurate, but it certainly fits the bias of the way it was trained. So this slide is all about thinking, as you're thinking about it, and as your students are thinking about artificial intelligence, they're interacting with this entity, this technology, that is utilizing some very human kinds of tendencies. And I think sometimes that makes people feel like, oh, well, this is my friend. And I'm being a little bit dramatic, but this is my partner. And it is a good strategic partner, but it's not something that you can trust fully because, like all humans, it's going to make mistakes. So keep in mind those quirks. And as you're guiding your students, remind them that they can't depend too heavily. And one of the things we're seeing with students, which I think is concerning, is we're seeing students and adults who are creating GPTs that they talk to. They may not have as strong of a social environment that they wish, or maybe they need some counseling, or maybe they need some career coaching or something along those lines. They'll ask the questions that they would have normally asked of a human to a GPT or an AI. And it can give you some good perspective, but it can also send you down some very bad paths. So it's just something to be aware of. I'll pause again and just ask, anybody have a question or a comment they'd like to make? Okay. So when we talk about artificial intelligence and we talk about these tools and how they work and these large language models, the way that we interact with the technology is through prompting. And prompting can be very, very effective, and it can be very, very ineffective depending on how that's done. One of the best ways to think through how best to prompt and how best to use AI is to think deeply about what I like to refer to, and most of the industry refers to, as use cases. Use cases are basically a specific task or problem that you're asking GPT or AI to solve or to create value around or to improve or to support. And these are ideally things that you already do on a daily basis or a weekly basis that are repetitive or they take a lot of time or they're required to use time that feels isn't a good use of your time and energy. So we try to create these use cases that we can leverage or take advantage of artificial intelligence so that we don't have to do those tasks. And I'm going to throw a lot of them up here on the screen. Don't feel like you need to read them all, but I took the different areas that this workshop was supposed to focus on: the future of work, critical thinking, creativity, entrepreneurs and innovation, future-ready skills, and responsible AI use. And I created a table, of course, using a GPT, because that's one of the best ways to do that, to find out what are some areas where you could create a prompt that could be very, very helpful in your daily life. And when your students think about this, they're going to do the same thing. If I have my entire semester's worth of lecture notes and my final exam is in a week, I might take all those lecture notes and ask a GPT to create a quiz or to create some study questions or to create some guidance around how to focus. That can be very, very helpful for the student, but there always has to be a step in that process where the human being checks the work of the, checks the work that the GPT has done. So as you're thinking about using AI, think of what things in your life are repeatable, you have to do frequently, and usually are condensing or bringing information into another format. Those are incredible good use cases for AI. But when you start thinking about things like emotion or synthesis or creativity, while AI can do those things, we really want to lean heavily on the human side for that. So there are great uses for AI, there are great uses for human abilities. And part of what I'm going to talk about very shortly is how when you bring together those qualities, it's pretty unstoppable and incredibly useful. So hopefully, as you're looking at this table, you might be thinking, wow, I can see some areas where if I could get AI to work for me, I would take advantage of these use cases in my working with artificial intelligence. Any questions? Okay. So I want to focus on 5 things, and later on, I'm going to share an assessment that you can go take or try on your own. But I'm focusing on 5 out of 10 of these different continuums that we've created that help people to think about how AI can be maximized and how humans can be maximized in this equation. So the 5 that I'm going to focus on, the first one, and you can see above that these continuums are where AI helps, where human skills must stay active. So we're trying to find that balance. And these continuums work with AI provides a certain set of skills and abilities, and human beings provide a certain set of skills and abilities. And at least at this point, it still feels like it falls in these opposite kinds of buckets or these opposite kinds of perspectives. So the first example I would give you is AI is very, very good with efficiency. If you have 100 pages of notes and you need it summarized in 1 page, it'll do it in 2 minutes, and no human being can do that. It's unbelievable. But if we're talking about the ability to understand the context or what's happening with that information and to be able to review it to make sure that it has done that task effectively, there has to be some human ability for presence in those meetings and understanding the context of what happened. Another great example is AI is incredibly good at going out and getting information. Find the top 10 list of, give me 45 examples of, give me 4 reasons why. Very, very good at it. Still need to check it. But what humans are very good at is over time when we learn, and the same with your students, over the course of a class, over the course of their years at university, as they gain more and more information, they develop wisdom. They become more complex and more effective and more wise thinkers in their 4th year than their 1st year. If our students and if we focus too much on just gathering information and not building that ability for wisdom, then we're going to lose out on the skills that are going to be required in the future. Because everything on the left side of this slide is not something that humans have to spend as much time engaging their time and energy in. Another example is prediction. AI can give you a ton of predictions, but it can't help you with discovery. Once you know that prediction, you can then go out and find 10 different ways that that connects to other things. Now, AI could give you a list of those, but to really feel it and understand it and discover things, that's really the human side of the equation. Another example, convenience. AI provides a lot of convenience, but it doesn't really give a lot of capability. It doesn't really do things that you don't ask it to do yet. And that capability is a human gains a great amount of information, and then they learn how to do things more effectively and they enhance and grow in their skill base. It's a really important differentiation. And then the last one I would share that we're going to focus on is certainty, which is the idea of AI will give you a lot of information with 100% certainty. I need you all to know, and I think you do, but you're going to need to remember for your students, is that certainty is a hoax. AI is usually right 80, 90% of the time, maybe. Sometimes it's abysmal. So there's always that need to understand that certainty. And the thing that humans do really, really well is we live in ambiguity. If you ask a GPT or an artificial intelligence entity to be ambiguous, it can kind of do it, but it doesn't really understand that context. As humans, we live in ambiguity all the time. So these are just some different continuums to think about as we're thinking through, what is it that AI can really provide for us? And what is it that we as humans really need to continue to hone our skills around? Any questions about this or any comments? Okay, hopefully if you're watching the recording later, that this context is working, we can always follow up. So the first one I do want to talk about is this efficiency versus presence. And one of the areas that a focus for the workshop is AI and the future of work. So I want to share that, as you probably already know, AI provides scans, it automates things. And like it can scan a whole lot of information and bring you back a list. It can summarize, it can accelerate the routine work that you do. We're recording this meeting, and you can even record the actual words that are said, and you can even ask it to take notes for you, and you can even ask it to summarize those notes into action items. That's all amazing efficiency. But the AI was never really present. So the human gift in this equation is, how in a room like this, even if it's virtual, do we build trust? How do we read context? How do we determine how to judge something? And how do we really stay present? And AI isn't thinking about what time of the day it is, but for many of you, it's late at night, and I may or may not be an entertaining voice for you, and that's going to impact how you take in this information. So I call that a human gift because I think each of us has to be aware of that in ourselves and others. Working together, we have this really nice, fortunate situation where AI can increase speed while humans ensure that the work that we do remains thoughtful, relational, and meaningful. Because AI doesn't worry about those things. It just wants to bring you stuff. But then when you take that stuff or that information and you turn it into something very contextual or very targeted to a population or a group of people, that's really, really important. Now, if you take a step back for your students, in early learning, it's all about just assimilating and gaining a lot of information to be able to talk about it, understand it. And then as learning becomes more complex, the student becomes more able to compare facts that they know in one discipline to another. How do I take a character and a plot line that I'm reading in a book and compare that to the science class that I'm taking? That's the kind of complex thinking we like. Or how do we bring divergent thoughts together? That's the future of work is really going to be focused on encouraging and needing people to judge what AI has created quickly and efficiently. And sometimes it takes a while so that it actually matches up with the audience. Far too many times are we seeing in the current work world where people will ask an AI to create a slide deck or create a set of speaking points, and it doesn't hit the mark because they just trusted the AI, which is guessing. It's just pulling together information. As the human, you have to be very good at demonstrating that presence and helping people to understand why the information and the facts and the figures that you're sharing actually apply to the audience. So I do have a set of questions on the bottom. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in. It might be a rather small group, but at the very least, give this some thought as you're teaching and even for yourself. How can we collectively use AI to work faster and take advantage of all this efficiency without losing that human presence and judgment? I hear a lot of teachers and educators that I work with that are taking more time in the classroom instead of reviewing facts and figures in the class, because that can be done, for homework or at another time, really taking advantage of that time in the classroom to say, let's talk about how this compares to other key pieces of information, or how does this come across from a human perspective. I think those are the kinds of skills in the future we're going to need, because all those other efficient information gathering types of situations are going to be easily completed by artificial intelligence. Would anyone like to answer the question, or your thoughts on the question? Okay, that's all right. So the next one I want to talk about is information versus wisdom. And this is really thinking about, AI. It provides ideas, information, option, patterns, all these kinds of pieces. It brings you a huge amount of information. It's almost endless. You can ask for more and more and more information. It'll continue to give it to you almost to the point that you can't even use it anymore. It's just so much. As the human, though, we start to question the assumption that AI brings us, where we start to connect the ideas and the information that it provides us, where you evaluate the meaning of that information and how it applies to what we're doing in the class. And it helps us to create with purpose. So when we think about this together and how we work together, AI can expand what we explore and what information we can gather, because it has its fingers in so much information that we can reach that we've never been able to reach before. But what humans have to do is say, okay, we have all this information. Let's make sure we know what's true. Let's make sure we know what's useful within that information. Let's make it original, and let's make it worth doing. So in essence, a lot of these things on the human perspective are how it feels versus how it thinks. And that's a nice way of thinking about it. So the question here is, how can AI support thinking without replacing that struggle that builds deeper understanding? We all enjoy it very much when we're in the classroom and we pose a question, or someone in the class poses the question, and everyone has that look on their face like, wow, I never really thought of it that way, or that's a really unique perspective. And now you have to spend some time sort of sorting through that new idea, and learning is very much about those moments. AI cannot do that, but as humans with wisdom, with experience, and with prior learning, can find ourselves in these really wonderful situations. It looks like someone has chatted, so, oh, facing a sound problem. I'm so sorry, Abera. I hope that's just for you. No offense. My signal looks really strong, and I'm hoping it's okay for everybody else. And certainly anybody can ask questions in the chat as well. So moving into our next, well, actually, let me go back one. Any questions or comments about information and wisdom? Okay, looks like the sound is just for you, Vera. I'm so sorry. So the next one I'll really want to talk about is prediction versus discovery. And when we're thinking about prediction, we're asking AI as a tool to give us information that it predicts to be true, or it thinks based on the information within its library, what is likely to happen. So AI is amazing at analyzing trends. If you give it trend data, it's going to be able to analyze that and give you a lot of different perspectives. You can adjust variables, and it'll help you adjust those variables based on that data. You can test possibilities. You can even ask it to identify gaps and even predict likely outcomes. Now, again, it needs the human touch to make sure that those are accurate, but those are amazing abilities that this tool can bring to us and our students. Imagine a student that really wants to analyze 5 trends. They can use AI and do that, where before they could only analyze 2 trends. In a way, if we leverage this technology well, our students through the technology will broaden their horizons and broaden their thinking. The human gifts that come with this around discovery is, okay, well, AI is providing me this analysis and this testing, and it's identified gaps, but what's unmet? What needs are unmet? Now, you can ask an AI to tell you the unmet needs, but it's not going to have the human context. What are the creative risks that could be taken with this information? How could the data be thrown askew? What new value is coming from this information? Or even when we have uncertainty as humans, when we're struggling over learning something and we're not sure what the answer is, some of the best discoveries ever across the history of mankind or womankind come from confusion. And I'm not sure what the answer is here, so I'm going to keep experimenting. And while you can use AI to help you experiment, it really is that human ability to want to experiment that creates all that discovery. So when we're talking about AI and humans working together, AI helps reduce those blind spots and gives more information while humans bring curiosity, courage, and original insight into the equation. And the question I like to ask here is when you're from an entrepreneurship point of view, um, how can, and this could be for students, for teachers, how can AI predictions be used while still leaving that room for discovery and surprise? A lot of you as instructors, as faculty, you bring information to your students and then you ask difficult questions, which force them to think in a different way. And it forces them to be shocked maybe with, I never thought of it that way. That's ideal for the human brain. It's not ideal for AI. AI struggles with that much, much more, as you're all aware. Any questions about or comments about prediction versus discovery? Okay, I do appreciate you staying with me and I hope you're enjoying what we're doing. So now let's talk about convenience and capability. I mean, if you're using artificial intelligence or GPTs currently, you know how convenient they can be. At a moment, at any moment, you can ask it to do something night or day. It doesn't get tired. It always has an answer, and it's often mostly right. And of course, again, to reiterate, as humans, we need to make sure we catch when it's not. So when we think about convenience and capability, as you already know, AI provides tutoring. It explains, it drafts, it organizes, it gives really fast support. You can use AI to take any source of information and turn it into an almost endless array of different representations, how it's laid out, how it answers questions, but it's all very factual and it's all based on the iteration of the machine. Humans, we practice and put effort into things. Through learning, we build confidence. And we talked about that already, where our students, when they start, they're just gathering facts. And then in essence, they're a little bit more like AI, right? They're trying to pull in all this information and understand it. But as they grow with their intellect and as they grow with their critical thinking, they build more confidence. And confidence is really interesting. You know this because as your students progress, they bring up more challenging points in the classroom, or they articulate more clearly, or they have a stronger position, or they know what something means, not just because they read it in a book, but because they've experienced it, seen it, or understand it in many contexts. These independent skills are amazing. Humans with practice get very, very good at them. These are not things that AI does. So as you're thinking about assignments, as you're thinking about classroom discussion, you could have a GPT or AI open right on the screen in your classroom and use it for these really convenient kinds of activities, but reserve time extra for the conversation with your students. Working together, AI supports learning, but learners still need to think, revise, make mistakes, and grow their own abilities. Any comments about convenience versus capability? And I just noticed there's 11 people, so I'm so glad some other folks were able to join. Let's move on. We're now going to talk about certainty and ambiguity. We already have talked about the fact that AI will always bring you back an answer, and rarely will it tell you that it's not sure, right? How often have you seen that? Very rarely. The other issue we have is when we're interacting with AI and we give it one of our ideas for it to process, it'll often tell us that it's a great idea. And that's something you have to be careful about because that certainty feels like, wow, I'm really intelligent. My AI just told me that I had a great idea. But remember, it's doing that because that's kind of what it's been trained to do. It's been trained to be a kind, engaging human being. And that goes back to what we talked about before with those different AI personality quirks. But from a certainty ambiguity point of view, AI, again, answers, recommendations, summaries, and possible solutions. And it does it with confidence and it does it with specificity. And now, even as you all know, you can ask it to give you sources. But as you might also know, those sources are not always accurate. Always click the source, because I've certainly done it before where I click the source and nothing in that article is about what it told me. And that's something we have to share with our students as well. While AI has certainty, it's sometimes wrong. So we need to treat it with ambiguity. We have to treat it with a little grain of salt. And we always have to think about how can we double check. So the human gift is checking that accuracy, considering the ethics. Oh, is this a biased answer? Is the AI making an assumption based on its large language model or that LLM? Humans recognize limits of information. So we think of things like hyperbole, where a fact is given and people might want to assume that that fact stands true in every situation. As humans, we know that's not true. And we're able to think about the limits of information and where we need to seek new information. AI has a harder time with that. And nuance is a big thing. We could do an entire workshop on nuance, because that's something where AI really, really struggles. If you ask it to be nuanced, it'll kind of do it, but it doesn't really understand what that means. As humans, we're inherently nuanced. Everything we say and do is based on our life experience, what we've learned in our own unique way. So that makes us special in that way. Working together, AI can provide direction, while humans remain really responsible for judging, understanding the fairness, and what's the final decision of whatever it is we're going to do. And to me, as an educator, if I'm working with my students and they want to use artificial intelligence, I encourage that, because it is an incredible tool. But I also say to them, if you hand in something that is obviously AI and you haven't double checked it, that's the new skill that you're not following through on. And that's going to have an impact on the evaluation of that assignment. So I think it's really important that we help students understand that the skills are shifting, but that doesn't mean they just don't have to practice those human skills. So I'll pause again. Any comments on certainty versus ambiguity? Okay, thank you. Feel free to jump in at any point. So the question for this one is, what steps should we take before trusting or acting on an AI generated answer? This is like a first year student in the college experience where they're first starting to experiment, or they came out of their prior schooling and they're not sure how to govern or think about this technology in a way that's going to be useful, or they've developed some bad habits. We need to help our students to understand that while this is an amazing tool, you have to take the time to check, and you have to have some ability to do that, and you have to know how to do that. One of the most interesting things to me is when people are sitting around a room with their phones in their hands and they're all talking about, I can't remember when that movie came out, or I can't remember when that song, who's the artist, who painted that painting, but no one thinks to look on their phone and type it in and get the answer. So while we have the capability to get all kinds of certain information, first of all, we have to check it. And second of all, a lot of humans, because they've depended on that, have lost the ability to have that curiosity follow through with an answer. And I think that's a little bit concerning. And it's certainly concerning as we think about deeper thinking in the more specified fields. Honestly, it even has an impact on general education and how we just operate when we're at a party, when we're at an office, or when we're at a school. Having those abilities strengthens us as people. So one gift I'd like to give you all, I do have an assessment. There are 10 of these continuums. I shared 5 with you today. Feel free to click on this link later when you receive the deck, or just type it into your browser and try it. It's basically going to ask you to self-assess. Where are you using those human skills versus those machine skills? And what does that say about how this technology is impacting your humanness and your ability to draw that line between the two? Could be very useful to have a group of students do this and then come back and have a discussion about what they learned or didn't learn from such an assessment. So I invite that. And if you ever, for some reason, want to contact me for more discussion around this, I certainly would be happy to. So it is at 49 in the hour, and I know a lot of you are up very, very late, and I so appreciate that. We have 12 people now, so that's fantastic. I thought I'd finish this off with just a discussion slide. This is a summary of what we've discussed. Let me take a minute to do that, and then I'll just open it up for questions. Mainly what we talked about is how can we use AI in ways that maximize its strengths while preserving what's human. We went through 5 different areas, 5 different continuums, and we had posed 5 different questions. This might be a nice infographic to use as you're thinking about connecting artificial intelligence with human intelligence and how you can more effectively bring those together, and how you can even speak with your students about where's that crossroads? Where's that continuum? Where does one thing stop and the other thing starts? Is that contextual? And of course, everything I'm saying now is very, very human.